Trump pushes back on reports of discontent with Hegseth, Noem, by Brett Samuels. President Trump on Wednesday said he was happy with his cabinet and specifically downplayed reports that he was frustrated with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. I read these same stories and I am unhappy with this one or that one, and I am not. I think the cabinet has done a great job, Trump said. Hegseth has come under intense scrutiny multiple times during his tenure leading the Pentagon, most recently over military strikes targeting an alleged drug boat in early September after an initial strike left survivors. I read a story that I am unhappy with Pete because he was attacking drug dealers. I would say very much the opposite. Pete Hegseth has been phenomenal, Trump said. Multiple reports have emerged from CNN, Ems Now, and other publications that the administration is eyeing potential replacements for Noem. Those reports cited frustrations among lawmakers over her handling of disaster relief funds, as well as internal concerns about personnel decisions within the sprawling agency. I read a story recently I am unhappy with Kristi. I am so happy with her, Trump said Wednesday. We have a border that is the best border in the history of our country. She is fantastic, actually. No, we have a fantastic cabinet. Other members of Trump's leadership team have faced criticism during their first year in office, including FBI Director Kash Patel and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but Trump has so far stopped short of ousting many members of his cabinet, a departure from his first term when there was frequent turnover among top staff.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we have another reporting. Let's get into it. This reporting is also by The Hill.
Senate Democrats press Navy Secretary to drop Hegseth's probe of Senator Kelly by Ellen Mitchell. Every Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, with the exception of Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat from Arizona, has expressed their serious concerns to Navy Secretary John Felon over his review of the Arizona Democrats' conduct, pressing him to drop the probe. Kelly, a retired Navy captain, is one of 6 lawmakers who last month released a video telling service members to disobey illegal orders. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the Pentagon was reviewing serious allegations of misconduct against Kelly, ordering Felon to investigate potentially unlawful comments made by Kelly in the November 18th video. A review of the complaint against Kelly is due to Hegseth on Wednesday. The military already has clear procedures for handling unlawful orders. It does not need political actors injecting doubt into an already clear chain of command, Hegseth wrote in a post on the social platform X. The 12 Democrats, however, call the probe an outright brazen abuse of power that amounts to a purely political exercise seeking to threaten legitimate and lawful actions by a duly elected senator and politicize our military justice system, according to the letter. Kelly, along with Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Democrat from Michigan, and Democratic Reps Chris DeLuzio, Pennsylvania, Maggie Goodlander, New Hampshire, Chrissy Houlihan, Pennsylvania, and Jason Crow Colo, directly addressed active duty military and intelligence personnel in a video shared to X, saying, "Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders." Trump quickly responded with fury, calling the lawmakers traitors who should be imprisoned and accused them of seditious behavior, punishable by death, in a November 20th post to his Truth Social platform. Administration officials have also suggested Kelly could be asked back to active duty and court-martialed under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The theory that a sitting member of Congress should be subject to disciplinary action entirely unrelated to their service, particularly for simply restating the law as articulated in the UNC, sets an incredibly dangerous precedent, the lawmakers wrote to Felon in their Tuesday letter. Kelly has remained defiant, telling attendees at a December 5th town hall event in Tucson that he believes Hegseth is just going to take a hike on a court-martial. "It is certainly unconstitutional," Kelly said. "They are not serious people, and I am not backing down." Kelly also last week said he had not been contacted by the Pentagon or others in the administration and had not heard anything beyond the public social media postings by Trump and Hegseth. In their letter, the senators point to those social media posts and public comments made by Trump and Hegseth as proof the review is baseless and patently political. While the department's official statement suggests that the review will be conducted, ensuring due process and impartiality, the president and his subordinates have made fair proceedings impossible, the letter states.
The memo, Trump battles MAGA vibe shift at end of first year back in power, by Niall Stanage. President Trump is nearing the end of his first year back in power, but he is in a very different political spot compared with 12 months ago. Back then, Trump and his Make America Great Again MAGA allies were euphoric about his convincing victory over former Vice President Kamala Harris. Their excitement was not just about his winning the White House. It was fueled by the hope that Trump had forced a shifting of the tectonic plates of national politics. Trump a year ago appeared to have forged a new and perhaps enduring coalition. Young men had shifted in his favor. Non-white, working-class voters were showing greater openness toward voting for him, whittling down the Democrats' advantage in their communities overall. Trump's hardline immigration views had not, as doubters once predicted, cost him dearly with Latino voters. He was making inroads there too. On the other side of the aisle a year ago, Democrats were nonplussed and dispirited by the return of a president whom they loathed and feared. and who they believed had been finished as a political force after the grim nadir of the January 6, 2021, riot. For Democrats, the problem was not only that Harris lost to Trump, it was that public polling showed their party being held in dismally low esteem. The picture is very different now. By poor poll ratings, which ebbed noticeably in recent months amid a contested and prolonged government shutdown. Some former allies, like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, have become more vocal in their criticism. Others, like Elon Musk and his quasi-official Department of Government Efficiency, have been nudged away from center stage after they proved politically damaging. As for the Democrats, they have at least begun to recover their footing. The opposition party was buoyed by election victories for moderates and progressives alike in big races in November. The massive No Kings rallies in October were not officially a Democratic event, but they were a vivid demonstration of the depth and intensity of anti-Trump sentiment. It is way too late to count Trump out, of course. Many have made the mistake of trying to do so in the past. The 47th president has so far avoided the rapid seeping away of power that often occurs even in the early days of a second term. He retains the avid support of a solid base, even as he draws just as much horror as ever from liberals. But above all, the sense is solidifying that not even Trump, a one-of-a-kind figure to his fans and detractors alike, is immune to the laws of political gravity after all. Exhibit A in that regard is the affordability issue, and the effect it has wrought on Trump's popularity. Poll after poll shows the president scoring poorly on the key issue of the economy, and even worse when pollsters ask more specific questions about inflation or the cost of living. A Harvard Capps and Harris poll released Monday found that 57% of surveyed voters believe the president is losing the battle against inflation. A Fox News poll released last month found that a mere 15% of voters believe they have been helped by Trump's economic policies, while 46% say they have been hurt by them, and 39% say those policies have made no difference. The most recent figures on inflation date back to September, but they show an annualized rate of 3%, exactly where it was when Trump took his second oath of office in January. Trump has also gotten his own way on the inflation issue, as he tends to do. Democrats could barely suppress their glee when the president recently referred to affordability as a scam emanating from his political opponents. Liberal critics believe that demonstrated a detachment from the reality of voters' lives. A remark in a Politico interview released Tuesday could also be damaging. Asked by reporter Dasha Burns what grade he would give himself on the economy, the president opted for A+++++. Trump and those close to him appear to tacitly admit there is a problem. The president journeyed to Pennsylvania on Tuesday to deliver an economic address, and he is expected to hit the road in similar fashion in the coming weeks to reinforce that message elsewhere. A White House press release on Tuesday pressed the claim that Trump delivers progress on lowering costs, with much more relief on the way. Trump on Monday announced a $12 billion program aimed at ameliorating the economic difficulties faced by farmers. Of course, it is an open question as to whether the de facto farm bailout would have been needed if not for Trump's own tariff polices. Chinese retaliation on the levies, particularly aimed at the soybean industry, hit some farmers hard. Trump has focused, as every president must, on the world stage, too. The president has been engaged in a very public lobbying campaign to get himself the Nobel Peace Prize. But the war in Ukraine rages on, and the much-heralded ceasefire in Gaza no longer involves anything close to a real ceasing of fire. Trump's hopes of enduring peace in the region seem increasingly fanciful. Meanwhile, the international focus has been a problem in the minds of America first. Isolationists like Green, who forcefully assert that Trump's musings about military action in Venezuela, willingness to mount missile strikes on Iran, and ongoing heavy support for an otherwise isolated Israel all amount to distractions from the domestic agenda. Back on Capitol Hill, Trump won a victory with the passage of his signature piece of legislation in the summer. But the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was not especially popular in most polls. Politics always delivers shots of unexpected news. For Trump, that came with the drama and scandal around Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier and sexual predator. Trump, who usually has an iron grip on his party, was unable to prevent a handful of Republicans from joining Democrats to force the release of the files. Trump ended up declaring support for a measure he and his aides had tried hard to derail. Trump's political strength still exists. He exerts it heavily on immigration, pushes the boundaries of presidential power, seeks vengeance against media enemies, and engages in the usual rhetorical fusillades against anyone who crosses him. But as the first year of his second term comes to a close, Trump's political mortality is all too clear. The memo is a reported column by Niall Stanage.
Judge blocks Trump National Guard deployment in Los Angeles by Zach Schonfeld. A federal judge ordered President Trump to end his deployment of the California National Guard in Los Angeles, ruling Wednesday that he must return control of the force to Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat. Roughly 100 troops remain in the city, and U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer ruled that Trump illegally kept them deployed months after sending troops to combat immigration protests this summer. The founders designed our government to be a system of checks and balances, Breyer wrote in his 35-page opinion. Defendants, however, make clear that the only check they want is a blank one. Though it marks a legal defeat for the administration, Breyer paused his ruling until Monday to provide the Justice Department a window to appeal, which the White House indicated it plans to push for. President Trump exercised his lawful authority to deploy National Guard troops to support federal officers and assets following violent riots that local leaders like Newsom refused to stop, White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson said in a statement. We look forward to ultimate victory on the issue. Trump deployed thousands of National Guard troops to Los Angeles this summer to combat protests that at times turned violent, one of several blue cities where the president has sent troops. It quickly sparked a lawsuit from Newsom and California Attorney General Rob Bonta, a Democrat who opposed Trump's efforts. The judge blocked that initial deployment. An appeals court later halted the ruling, but most of the troops have since been sent home. Breyer's new decision blocks an extension that kept 300 California National Guard troops under federal control until February. 200 were sent to Oregon while the remaining troops stayed in Los Angeles. Once again, a court has firmly rejected the president's attempt to make the National Guard a traveling national police force, Bonta said in a statement. For more than 5 months, the Trump administration has held California National Guard troops hostage as part of its political games, Bonta continued, but the president is not king. And he cannot federalize the National Guard whenever, wherever, and for however long he wants without justification. This is a good day for our democracy and the strength of the rule of law. The statute Trump cites in deploying them requires an invasion, rebellion, or other situation in which the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Trump has primarily pointed to the latter precondition and additionally argues that federal judges have no business second-guessing the president's determination. Breyer tossed that argument and went on to disagree that the precondition was satisfied. Without a demonstration that the president's ability to execute the law is currently being impeded at the time of deployment, he lacks adequate grounds for federalization, Breyer wrote. Breyer was appointed to the bench by former President Clinton. The legal battle in Los Angeles is one of several unfolding across the country involving Trump's National Guard deployments. The Supreme Court is weighing Trump's emergency appeal concerning his deployment in Illinois, and lawsuits stemming from his deployments to Portland, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. are pending in lower courts. Updated 11:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the appeal, or excuse me, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has walked back their original ruling. Let's get into our next reporting.
Judge grants DOJ unseal Epstein sex trafficking case records by Max Rigaud. A federal judge ruled Wednesday that grand jury transcripts from Jeffrey Epstein's 2019 sex trafficking case can be unsealed. U.S. District Judge Richard Berman of the Southern District of New York, in a 4-page decision, cited a law passed last month requiring the Department of Justice DOJ to release files related to the convicted sex offender in granting the federal government's motion to unseal the transcripts. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, signed into law by President Trump after receiving near-unanimous support in Congress, requires the DOJ to publicize documents regarding Epstein's case by December 19th. Berman had previously denied the government's motion to unseal the documents in August, arguing that the grand jury testimony is merely a hearsay snippet of Epstein's alleged conduct. The files related to the case include 70 pages of grand jury transcripts, a PowerPoint slideshow, 4 pages of call logs, 2 letters from attorneys for Epstein's victims, and 2 letters from individual victims, both from August, and an August letter from the co-executors of Epstein's estate, Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn. In his Wednesday ruling, Berman urged the DOJ to redact the names and other personal information of Epstein's victims from the files. Berman's ruling comes a day after a federal judge granted the DOJ's request to release records from the sex trafficking case against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice. Maxwell is serving a 20-year prison sentence on child sex trafficking and related charges. On Friday, a federal judge also ordered the DOJ to release jury transcripts from Florida's investigation into Epstein, which resulted in the latter serving nearly 13 months in prison in the late 2000s on charges of child prostitution and soliciting a prostitute. Epstein was charged in 2019 for allegedly running a sex trafficking ring that included underage girls. The disgraced financier died in prison just over a month after his arrest in July of that year. The DOJ and FBI stated earlier this year that Epstein committed suicide, confirming authorities' initial evaluations, and did not keep a client list. The ruling sparked a renewed public interest in the case, as Trump pledged to release files related to Epstein during his 2024 campaign. Updated at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Trump also, per new reports, has officially been hit with articles of impeachment. Here we are. Here is the fresh reporting. Let's get into it. Rapid fast. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Al Green, Democrat, files for resolution to impeach President Trump for abuse of power and incitement of violence and death threats against lawmakers and federal judges. On Wednesday, December 10th, I filed H-Res 939 to impeach Donald John Trump, President of the United States. The solution asserts that President Donald Trump is an abuser of presidential power who, if left in office, will continue to promote violence, engender individualist hate, undermine our democracy, and dissolve our republic, and that he is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1 pertains to President Trump calling for the execution and execution of 6 Democrats, lawmakers whom are currently serving in the United States Senate or U.S. House of Representatives, and who previously served in the military or in the U.S. intelligence communities. Article 2 describes how President Trump has fostered a political climate in which lawmakers and judges face threats of political violence and physical assault, has made threats and vindictive comments against federal judges, putting their safety and well-being at risk, and is undermining the independency of independent judiciary. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Al Green's rationale for filing these articles of impeachment and as well as bringing them to a vote is explained in the letter accessible here. And the letter reads, "To all people of goodwill, I take no delight in proclaiming President Donald Trump is an abuser of presidential power who is endangering individualist hate, putting American lives at risk, undermining our democracy, and dissolving our republic at this critical moment in history. We must do more than confront the subordinate question of what he will do. We must also confront the superior question of what we will do. We know that if any other president had called for the execution of members of Congress and used repudiative language to intimidate federal judges, the opposition party would not wait until they had a majority to vote for his impeachment. they would do more than condemn his behavior. Each and every one would have voted to impeach him, and some members of the other party would join them. We cannot wait until we all agree to do the right thing. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that the time is always right to do what is right. John Lewis and peaceful protesters did more than complain and condemn. They didn't wait until I was safe to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday. They made previously clear where they stood at that critical moment in time with their words, deeds, and actions. They had the courage of their convictions to march unbloodied but unbowed. They marched on until the victory was won. That allowed President Lyndon B. Johnson to get the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed, making it possible for many of us to get elected to Congress. Dear friends, this is our Edmund Pettus Bridge moment, a critical moment in time that can impact the rest of time. My dear beloved brothers and sisters, do what you may. And for me and mine, I will take a stand to save lives. I will take a stand to protect government of the people, by the people, for the people. I will take a stand to impeach this abuser of presidential power. I will do so even if I must stand alone, because for me, on this issue, it is better to stand alone than not stand at all. I must, with the respect for God and country, tonight, December 10, 2025, I will stand in the well of the U.S. House of Representatives and call for a vote on H.Res. 939 to impeach President Donald J. Trump. Al Green, member of Congress, scion of enslaved Africans, sacrificed to make America great. Progenitor of August 20th as Slavery Remembrance Month and Day. P.S. My heart expressions of gratitude to constitutional scholar and attorney John Bonales and the team at Free Speech for People, influencer Jessica Denson, and the throngs of patriots who have inspired and or assisted me in bringing these articles of impeachment to fruition, who before enclosed herewith. Should you require additional information, please contact my Chief of Staff, Aaron Linsfesti, by email at aaron.linsfesti@mail.house.gov. Al Green, Member of Congress, Skylon of Enslaved Africans, Sacrificed to Make America Great, progenitor of August and August 20th as Slavery Remembrance Month and Day, 119th Congress, First Session, H.S. 939. Impeach Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. In the House of Representatives, December 10, 2025, Mr. Al Green of Texas submitted the following resolution. Resolution: impeach President Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. 1. Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is an abuser of presidential power who, if left in power, will continue to promote the incitement of violence, endanger individuals' hate, undermine our democracy, and dissolve our republic, that he is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment be exhibited to the United States Senate. Articles of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and of the people of the United States of America, against Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, in maintenance and support of its impeachment. Against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1. 10. Abuse of presidential power by calling for the execution of members of Congress in his conduct of the office of the President of the United States of America, Donald John Trump, in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care of that the laws be faithfully executed and has unfaithfully, dangerously, and unconstitutionally abused his official position by threatening Democratic lawmakers in Congress with execution. President Trump called for the execution of 6 Democratic lawmakers who all are currently serving in the United States Senate or U.S. House of Representatives, and who previously served in the U.S. military or U.S. intelligence communities, in response to a short video that they posted on November 18, 2025. In their video, the Democratic lawmakers appropriately urged current members of the military and intelligence communities to adhere to the Constitution and the laws of our country. They specifically said, like us, you all swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad, but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders. You can refuse illegal orders. You must refuse illegal orders. No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution. On November 20th, 2025, in response, President Trump called for their execution. In one social media post, he wrote, "It's called seditious behavior at the highest level. Each of these traitors to our country should be arrested and put to on trial. Their words cannot be allowed to stand. We won't have a country anymore. An example must be set." President Donald John Trump. In another, he wrote of the lawmakers' seditious behavior punishable by death, dangerously and unconstitutionally. He reposted a third party's post. "Hang them, George Washington would." President Trump's call for the execution of lawmakers is a reckless and flagrant abuse of power. That promotes the extrajudicial punishment and the assassination of members of Congress, and warrants impeachment by the U.S. House of Representatives and trial by the Senate. Article 2. Abuse of presidential power to intimidate federal judges in violation of the separation of powers and independence of the judiciary. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States of America, Donald John Trump, in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has unfaithfully, dangerously, and unconstitutionally abused his official position by threatening federal judges. President Trump has fostered a political climate in which lawmakers and judges face threats of political violence and physical assault, and in this climate has made threats and vituperative comments against federal judges, putting at risk their safety and well-being, and undermining the independence of our judiciary. Case in point, in response to a federal district court ruling with which President Trump disagreed, he posted this radical left lunatic judge, of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator who was sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, was not elected president. This judge, like many of the corrupt judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. Another U.S. District Judge has reported receiving increased numbers of violent threats, particularly after he began hearing arguments in a lawsuit against the Trump administration in November 2025. In 2025, roughly a third of the federal judiciary has been flooded with threats, with data showing that these threats spike each time Trump uses abusive rhetoric against against judges. On May 2nd, 2025, Reuters reported that U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson addressed President Donald Trump's attacks on the judiciary. The relevant part of the article stands as follows. United States Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said on Thursday attacks by Republican President Donald Trump and his allies on judges were not run down and seemed designed to intimidate the judiciary. Specifically, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson remarked that the attacks are not random. They seem designed to intimidate those who serve. In this critical capacity, Justice Jackson added that the threats and harassment are attacks on our democracy, on our system of government, and they ultimately risk undermining our Constitution and the rule of law. The judiciary is afforded power over all cases in law and equity arising under the Constitution, the law of the United States, and treaties made and to controversies to which the United States shall be a part of U.S. Constitutional Article 3, Section 2, intimidating judges and recklessly calling for the impeachment and removal of judges who disagree with him, demonstrate a willingness by Trump to usurp authority afforded by our Constitution to the judiciary, and demonstrate a disregard for the Constitution and the careful balance of powers that protect our country from abusers by any single branch. President Trump's threats place the lives of federal judges, the officials in court, and innocent bystanders at risk, promote the incitement of violence, and undermine our democracy, which cannot survive where President Trump's incendiary comments endanger in vicious hate, and where dissent is punishable by death. In all of this, Donald John Trump has acted in a manner contrary to his trust as president and subversive of constitutional government, to the great prejudice of the cause of law and justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States, where for Donald Trump has by such conduct warrants impeachment, trial, and removal from office. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this legal breaking reporting video analysis update. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting video analysis update, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more legal breaking news that you need to know about, ladies and gentlemen. More to come soon.